Okay, we're going to look at the level 2 version of this list sample project. In this we now have two lists. We have a shopping list and a to-do list. In both cases you can add items to the list and then double click to remove items from the list. And you can switch between. So there's two lists now that we have. So to do this I've created two different items, a shopping list item and a to-do list item for this. Both shopping lists and to-do list items implement this iList item interface and share this kind of shared interface, so they both can be treated as these items. There's also two different repositories for these, a to-do repository and a shopping list repository, because these are saved to different files in the database, and they work with slightly different fields and you need to save different things. So there's two different things, but those are the two classes that are unique to each one. There's a generic list controller that works with all the lists, and an item list, which is a generic list of items that the list controller works. The list controller is basically tied to, the idea is it should be tied to the form. So if we look at one of these forms and look at some of the code for this, it creates a list controller, and mainly it works with the list controller to update items there. So for example, it will on the forms will extract information from the forms, create an item and call list controller add items, or call the list controller to get a list of items and then display those all on the copy those all into the list box. So the general format of this, let me bring up just a view of this, is that we have the main program runs the form uses the list controller, and the list controller uses one of two repositories, and then they create an item list, which is a generic list. The item lists work with through this item list iList item interface to create either to-do items or shopping items and return them here, and those are sent back to list controllers. And again, both of these repositories are done through this iList repositories. So it lets us add more items without having to have all the classes here. It also lets us do some better these interfaces lets us do some unit testing. So we have actually a list controller unit test I've implemented. So here's our list controller tests. And again, when we create a list controller, we pass it a repo, either a shopping list repo or a to-do items repo. So we pass that into the constructor there. So in the unit test, I can actually create a mock repo that implements that interface and just do a really simple version of our repo. And then in our unit test, I can pass that in and get that to run there. So that's the main structure of this. And again, the idea was to try to make creating multiple lists good and be able to treat items the same. They all implement this iList item interface, create the treat the repos the same through this. There is some issues. It's still not perfect. They didn't want to extract too much from here, in that right now I'm using the repos basically as a factory. So in the main area I create a repo to pass to the controllers, but I also use that as a factory, so I create to-do items or the other items for that. Probably a better way would be to make a generic factory class which would create these based on what parameters you passed into it. But just shows you a little more abstraction that you can do to add a little more complex structure for this.